Good morning everyone, and today we're checking out a brand new video from Popcross Studios of Starseed Psyche Part 5. Our soldier training gets good, and as you can tell, I've really gotten into this series. Because I'm about caught up. So let's keep on going, baby! Woo!
Previously on Starseed Psyche, Kaio
Sorry, that was a little loud. I'm sorry.
made it into the Super Wraith Squad training program and surprised everyone by being able to utilize 2 of the Super Wraith gauntlets at once. He's not sure why he was
With a perfectly even 77.7%.
able to get 2 Super Wraith blades working, each at 77.7% power, when the average soldier can only have 1 working between 60 and 75%, but he was happy to impress, even having squad captain Yamada Toshiko, the tech's inventor, state that his level meant she'd want him on her Super Wraith squadron if he made it through training.
Pulling an Uncle Sam. I want you on my team. But he'd only hear, I want you.
This was extra exciting to Kaio because he suspected that she was the destined love of his life that he was meant to meet. Kaio's best friend, Chip, made it into the program as well,
Chip!
and they were put in a training squad under the watch of Squad Captain Hekima Aka, who is never happy about being cruel to his recruits, but does push them as hard as he can so he can make sure they are ready if they get through training to fight the invading Qserax. Mechanical creatures and beings still believed to be sent after humanity by the Qsidians, though they claim innocence. Kaio struggled immensely with his first day.
You know, I'd actually really love for him to draw the Qserax. Or whatever the aliens are called. I'm sorry, the names keep flipping in my head. Qserax, Qsidians, and I can't remember which is which, but I'd still would love to see the aliens.
Training, and was frustrated that their training was far less flashy and fun than he thought it would be, but pushed through his limitations to end his first day strong, even inspiring Chip and new parkour athlete friend, Jin Quinn, to do the same. Kaio hopes that he's ready for the intensive 4 months of training because, by the time it ends, he will be right near the deadline he's been working towards, the day his spirit guide, Yorick, told him he'd finally shake hands with the love of his life and his greatest rival. If you're enjoying this series, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the series playlist linked below with a friend who might like it. Now enjoy the next chapter of Starseed Psyche. In the 4 months of Super Wraith training, I'm
actually really glad I saw doubling up on his videos each week, because now I get double the story!
Pretty sure I got more exercise than I had in my entire life. The second day was just as tough as the first, physically, but at least I felt like we were all in it together. Even though Squad Captain Hekima had returned to his ruthless character. We barely used the Super Wraith gauntlets for the first 4 weeks, except to amplify our emotions and see if we would snap. In that time, our bunk room dropped from 18 people, including our squad captain, down to just 9. Those of us who made it through were all rewarded by finally getting to do the cool part of Super Wraith training. Starting in the 5th week, we finally got onto the fun stuff. Hekima explained what I'd already anticipated, that it required a lot of mental and physical discipline to use the gauntlets consistently. The first month had been structured to weed out those who couldn't handle it and prepare the rest of us for what was coming. When we were finally allowed to use the gauntlets fully, things got a lot more exciting. I probably would have found the exercises grueling a few months prior, but by that point I was so used to the boring and repetitive exercises we'd been doing that this practically felt like playing an immersive video game all day.
Oh look, Okay, so Chip has one on his left arm, and the parkour girl has one on her right arm, with of course the main character being the only one to have 2 at the start. I wonder, and this is probably just more so they grab one at random and hand it over, instead of actually having one like designed specifically for,
The first week with the gauntlets, we
forget I was trying to say anything. Moving on.
Put back into the obstacle courses, but they'd been altered to be much more complicated and more dangerous to compensate for us wearing our full suits. The retractable ceiling was left open, and a wall had even descended into the floor to double the width of the 2-kilometer track. New structures, like the basic framings of buildings, extended upwards. Some rose 3 times the height of the course walls. It sort of looked like a mini fake city full of incomplete buildings, but with a lot more mud pits. We were put through a lot of different tests in that setup, but the first and most common involved 10 or so dummies being scattered across the area for our squad to find and rescue, without cutting any of them in half with our blades. There would also be a few dozen soldiers acting like Qserax, firing live rounds at us. I assumed
Life?
they'd be using the
Uh-oh.
beanbag guns again, since our faces and parts of our neck were uncovered while wearing the suits, but it turns out the suits create a protective invisible shield around us, so even if we were shot in the face, we'd be fine. I didn't even know tech like that was possible outside of sci-fi movies, but
You're in a
then
sci-fi
again, I guess
world,
my
mate.
life had basically become a sci-fi movie.
Exactly!
Our suits were rigged up with impact detection, so if we took too much fire, we had to step out of the game and do push-ups, sit-ups, and squats until the rest of the squad finished the mission. While our military's rounds couldn't pierce Super-8 suits, shots from a Q-Serax rifle could break through after enough blows, so they were preparing us for that, making sure we trained to avoid getting hit too often. Luckily, as far as we knew, nothing could penetrate a Super-8 blade, so we could use those to block. Having two
That's
to work with
good.
became a big advantage for me. We also weren't allowed to attack the soldiers with our blades because we easily cut them to pieces if we hit them.
Yeah,
to
don't
take
wanna
out the
do
soldiers,
that.
we had to get right up to them and tap a button on their chest.
Click.
There were some mannequins of Q-Serax set up, and those we could strike with our blades. They were usually placed near the civilian dummies, and we had to slice them up before reaching our target to rescue them. I was prepared for the blades to be difficult to get the hang of, but honestly, they almost felt like an extension of my own arm. Even when I flung them off my body and I controlled them soaring through the air, it was
that's
incredibly
awesome.
intuitive to use them. My aim wasn't perfect near the beginning, but I got better really fast. The enhanced speed, strength, and durability from the suits felt natural quickly, too. Though they didn't protect us from everything. We did eventually lose 2 more members of our squad to injuries. One guy accidentally sliced his own Super 8 blade halfway through his leg.
Ooh.
The doctors were able to repair it so he wouldn't need it amputated, but he was out of the program to recover. It ended up
Yeah.
being a good reminder to us that these blades and the suits were seriously dangerous, but also
I guess it kind of makes sense. They can cut through themselves.
extremely effective when used properly. However Toshiko had made these things, she'd done an incredible job.
Damn
I
right.
saw Toshiko surprisingly little in those first months, and to be honest, the amount I cared about the whole handshake thing was kind of slipping. I know that probably sounds really weird, and I did still care, but so many other things in life were going so well. I was just more focused on what I was doing during the training period.
And that's what you need
Those
to be
in our
focusing
squad
on.
that made it through to the second month became super close, and most of my free time I was hanging with them, or at least with Chip and Quinn. Though it had taken a little bit longer for me to warm up to Quinn. Our only free day when we had no official training was Sunday, but
yep.
I'd still get up early and go to a quiet room or area outside and do some online instructed dance lessons. It wasn't worth the transit time in and out of the base to go to in-person classes, but I still wanted to keep working on it. It was more for me than anything else. I did suspect that the
course.
reason for my dance career being important on my life path was so I could be agile and fit enough to be a good Super 8 soldier, but by going
When
to
the
the
time
classes
came.
again, I'd gotten hooked and wanted to keep going. After
Hmm.
a period of only doing ballet, I started practicing some breakdancing moves I'd never tried before.
Breakdancing, that was the other one. Oh my god. Like back in the second episode or whatever, I was trying to remember some, but I could only think of freaking ballet. I couldn't remember breakdancing.
I'd briefly tried some breaking when I was younger, but never had good enough balance in handstands, and my shoulders had never been strong enough to pull off the coolest moves.
Shoulders.
Strength certainly wasn't a problem anymore after my months training with Chip, and now my time in the Super 8 program, but strength also wasn't all it took.
Well,
I'd
yeah,
gotten
you
stuck
gotta
on a
have
combo
balance.
that I really wanted to nail. One that
literally.
began with an aerial twist, which starts off looking like an armless cartwheel, but your body twists before landing. I could land that 9 times out of 10 or so after practicing it for a couple sessions, but I wanted to
Good.
land it sideways, then go straight into an L kick. Basically a one-armed handstand where you throw one leg over your head, far to your side, and grab your foot with your free hand. I'd gotten
Oh, that's not
decent
bad.
at doing the L kick on its own, but I always had too much momentum coming out of the aerial, and when I'd go into the L kick, I'd just keep spinning and fall over. I tried compensating and going less hard on the aerial, but then I would just not land it and end up slamming various parts of my body into the ground.
Ugh,
On my
got a
third day of
big
trying to get
bruise.
that trick, Quinn happened upon me. Whoa, Adachi. Since when do you do tricking? Trying to sneak up on my territory?
Whoops.
I really didn't like someone catching me dancing, and was already frustrated from failing the move over and over.
I would just be embarrassed.
I'm breakdancing, not tricking. I mean, pretty similar, I guess, but
Yeah, I was
I'm not
about to
really
say.
getting anywhere with it either way. She walked closer with her arms crossed. What are you trying to land? An aerial twist into an L kick? Do you know what? Immediately, she did a perfect aerial twist and went straight into an L kick, holding herself in the pose easily while saying,
Oh my god.
"Yeah, I'm vaguely familiar." She bent her elbow and flung herself right back into a standing position like it was nothing. I did think Quinn was cool by that point, but I was not in the mood for her competitiveness at that moment.
I'm calling it now. She has to be your love interest.
She nodded. "Come on, show me what you got." I'd really rather practice in private. "Oh, what's the matter, Mr. Two Blades?" She immediately did the trick again, taking it a step further by spinning on her hand in the L kick to face me afterwards. "Don't like it when another squad member can do something you can't?" I clenched my teeth. Even Hekama's training hadn't made me as irritated as I was in that moment. What did she have to show off for? I already knew she was a crazy parkour master. Fine. I paused, thinking about how much force I wanted to put into the aerial, and got really in my head. I glanced up at Quinn, waiting, still standing
That may be it. You're overthinking it. You're giving yourself the yips. All you need to do is just do it.
effortlessly on one hand.
That's the trick.
When I thought I finally had my head around the move, I leapt into it, and didn't even land the twist, slamming my shoulder into the ground. Quinn leapt
Sorry, I didn't realize I just left my mouse on screen like that.
her feet
Sorry.
again. Next time, try thinking about it even more. Seems like that really helps. She laughed. Would you please just go? I snarled. She threw the trick again. I'll leave if you really think you're never gonna land this thing. I will land it. I paused. I'd underflipped last time, so this time I knew to go farther. I took a deep breath, then leapt. And over-rotated, rolling onto my side after my feet hit the ground. Wow, maybe I should leave. Looks like you really can't keep up, she chuckled. Would you shut up, Quinn? I'm trying. Well, stop trying and just do it. Fine!
Exactly.
Without thinking, I threw myself into the aerial. My feet landed in a perfect position, and I flung my hand down, swung my leg up, and caught my foot, holding it in the perfect position.
See?
I could hardly
Exactly.
believe it. I'd finally landed it. And all it had taken was someone annoying me into it. I dropped my feet back down and looked over at Quinn. That felt awesome. I'm sorry that You ever play horse, Adachi? She interrupted before even letting me apologize for snapping at her. I didn't like that I'd fallen back into an old angry pattern out of frustration with not landing the trick, then her heckling me, but Quinn wasn't bothered by the outburst at all. As long as she had someone to compete with, she was happy. We started playing a dance version of the basketball game Horse. One person threw a trick, and if they landed it properly, the other person had to land it too, or they got a letter of the word horse. Get the whole word, and you lose.
Oh, yeah.
Quinn won 3 of the 4 games we played, and she wasn't going to let me forget it for the next week until we played again. Her smack talk could get kind of grating and annoying, but I had to admit it was also pushing me to get better faster. She joined me a few times over the next weeks, and my breakdancing skills shot through the roof. She even started teaching me some parkour skills, while I taught her some ballet moves.
You can mix them
She
all
wasn't
in?
as chill of a person to be around as Chip, and I'd definitely rather hang out one-on-one with him when I wanted to relax. But I was really starting to get what Yorick had meant about a rival pushing you to be your best self. Both Quinn and I were learning a ton of cool stuff from each other. That was another reason I started to care less about the
Well, damn, if she's a rival, that's gonna... Okay.
approaching handshake deadline. It seemed like a no-brainer that Quinn was gonna end up being my rival. She was already playing that exact part Yorick had foreseen. I'd even started reconsidering whether Toshiko would be the love of my life. Because I barely saw her, I started to think it could have maybe been one of the 2 other girls in our squad. Though, there was a moment 2 months in that did get me thinking about Toshiko again. Chip and I were headed to the showers covered in mud, but joking around. That is, until we turned into a hall just as General Yamada Ritsu and her boss, the Chief of Staff, Shijikaburu, walked towards us.
Greetings.
We both clamped our mouths shut, pressed our backs to the wall, stood at attention, and saluted. The Chief of Staff didn't even glance at us, but General Ritsu gave us a slight friendly nod. They passed, and I was going to lower my stance, when I saw that Toshiko was walking on behind them, swiping through paperwork on a tablet. Chip and I didn't want to seem disrespectful to her as a squad captain, so we kept our stance as she passed. As she did, her eyes glanced from her tablet down to her feet, and I wasn't sure why at first. She stopped and glanced up at my eyes with a slight smirk. Private Adachi, she gestured down.
His towel fell, didn't it? His towel fell.
Down to my feet. Standing at attention doesn't usually involve fifth position.
Oh my god.
I immediately looked down at my feet. They were both pointed inwards, touching, with one foot directly in front of the other. My arm that wasn't saluting had a slight rounded arc to it. This was a common ballet
Oh my god, it's so much less than I thought. I'm sorry.
stance called fifth position. I looked back up, unsure of what I was going to mutter out, but she had already started walking away. I was embarrassed at first, but then it hit me. She knew what fifth position was. Was she a dancer too? Maybe there was another reason I needed to be a dancer before getting to know the love of my life after all. That possibility did linger in my head, but it was just part of a bigger tapestry of all the great things going on in my life during that training period. There was a day 3 months into training where I came out of the showers, nobody else was around, and I looked at myself in the mirror. Completely unexpectedly, when I looked at my face, I saw that I was smiling. Naturally, unprompted by any specific thing happening, I just had a smile on my face. It was a silly little moment, but one that made me realize, for the first time in ages, I was just naturally and genuinely happy. I liked who I was, and I liked my life. There were so many things I was excited about improving on. I had great friends, I felt energized and healthy, and I was working towards doing something that mattered for people outside of just myself. The 333-day deadline hadn't come yet, but I could feel that I was already living a beautiful life. I was also glad nobody was around, because out of nowhere I just broke down crying right there. I dropped to the floor and sat against the wall, crying, then laughing, then crying again. I couldn't believe how much I'd been able to completely rewrite my entire life in just under a year. It was like my old life was some sad, horrible dream.
See, surprisingly, that's all it actually takes. People think it takes decades and lots of money, but all it needs is just dedication. And you could get something that's quick as what he did, maybe even faster. Not that it's a race or any kind of competition, so don't do that.
Dream. This new life could be painful and frustrating at times, but I was consistently excited for whatever each new day was going to bring, knowing that even when it was hard, I could fight through it and get better from it. Though some of the challenges that came up did so in unexpected ways. When we were all eating together, occasionally the Cusidians would come up as a topic, and some people showed they had a pretty violent hate for them. I know judging them for that probably sounds pretty hypocritical of me, given how much I used to hate them, but after all the work I'd done on myself, that hate just wasn't in me as much as it used to be. I was still convinced they were behind the Q-Serax attacks, but technically we didn't know that for sure, so hearing people lay into them and talk about how they were excited to carve up the Cusidians with their Super-Wraith gauntlets felt kind of uncomfortable. Even Chip got surprisingly into those conversations. Hearing him express any kind of violent intent towards anyone was totally bizarre.
That is
Second we get any proof the Cusidians are behind these attacks, I'm gonna shove my super blade up their keister so far they can taste it. I thought about talking to him.
At least he did only say once there's proof
about it, but didn't want anyone to think I was pro-Cusidian. I wasn't, and didn't want to give any hint of that idea. Part of the reason the talk bothered me was because of something I'd heard in Argent Angelo's anger book, multiple times by that point. One of the more sneaky and sinister types of anger that was harder for me to eradicate from my life was self-righteous hatred. I'd often find myself around people with similar political views to myself, and get caught in loops of talking with them about how stupid and vile those on the other side of the political spectrum were.
Okay.
It would feel somewhat cathartic in the moment, laying into these supposed others who were so wrong in their views, until I realized that one of the main things we oft criticized them for was being angry and hateful. And all the while, I was wasting time talking about how much I hated them. That was a hard lesson for me to learn, that in the same way love is love, Hate is hate.
Exactly.
No matter who it was I was spending time hating, no matter how justified I felt in my hatred, I was still contributing more hate to the world, and therefore was no better than those I hated. This does not mean you take no action to stop those who are doing things out.
Oh, I just realized this is actually a One Piece. It's technically a multi-piece, but it's a One Piece.
Of hatred for another, but you
To make a joke.
yourself must take that action because you are trying to protect others out of love, not to tear down your supposed enemies out of hate. Love breeds more love, and hate breeds more hate.
Yep.
Plus, when you allow the hatred for others to fade, you may do what I did and grow a greater sense of curiosity towards why others have the views they have. Eventually, you may even learn, as I did, that, surprise, surprise, I didn't know everything, and those I criticized so harshly occasionally knew better than I did. I have personally taken on the mantra that I never meet an enemy, simply a person with differing perspectives on the world.
That's true.
I never brought up that concept in our training days, as I knew it wouldn't be popular in a military setting, but did my best to live by it. I was going to fight to protect people because I wanted to protect them, not because I was excited to kill the Cusidians. Though, admittedly, I felt less bad being excited to fight the Cuserax, knowing they were all cybernetic creatures. It probably would be a bit of fun tearing them apart.
As long as there's no
When we got
blood.
into our last week of training, we were put into the most difficult trial yet. They got us up at 2:30 each morning to do 3 hours of standard exercises before putting on our gauntlets. Then, we suited up and were put into the fake city-style obstacle course and were told that there were innocent civilians to be saved, but we couldn't know how many. This time, those who needed saving weren't just dummies either. They were soldiers playing the role of innocents. If we were careless with our Super 8 blades, we could literally kill Japanese military personnel.
Oh god, that'd be
Luckily, Squad Captain Hekima, General Yamada, and the rest of us in the squad all knew at that point. We were ready.
I was gonna say, hey, look, her blade for some reason has an edge. That's different.
Rescuing civilians could have been more difficult for me because, with 2 arm blades, it was harder to throw someone over one shoulder and run with them safely. Thankfully, I had gotten good enough at having my blades hover above or around me while I was still moving normally.
That's
When I got to my first civilian, he was sitting on the 7th floor of one of the building-like structures and was surrounded by 4 Cuserax mannequins. There were also 2 soldiers rigged up with Hoa Type 20 assault rifles. They both started firing on me as soon as I got onto the floor. I held one blade out to block and did some tricking flips Quinn had taught me to disorient and dodge, while my other blade flew forward, and in one arcing swing sliced the 4 Cuserax mannequins in half without getting close to the soldiers. I then had the blade face sideways and float right in front of one of the firing soldiers. She tried to step around it, but I just kept moving it right into her path so she couldn't shoot me. I was counting the other soldiers' shots, knowing the Hoa had a 30-round magazine. The second he fired his 29th shot, I stopped using my blade as a shield and cut a small chunk out of the nearest metal bar of the building. I grabbed it with my non-bladed hand and whipped it at the reloading soldier. It hit the button directly in the center of his chest, and he was out of combat.
It's like, click.
I then sent my second blade to block the remaining soldier's fire even more, as I closed the distance between us. She did her best to fire around it, but by the time she got aim on me, I was close enough to grab the gun and yank it from her. I tapped the button on her chest, and she was out too. Still moving quickly, I ran over to the fake civilian and crouched down next to him. "Are you injured in any way?" "A Cuserax shot my leg and I can't walk," he replied. They'd been instructed to have various injuries or issues so we could practice acting in accord with how we would in real life. "I'm gonna get you help. If you don't like heights, keep your eyes closed." I grabbed him as gently as I could. With the gauntlets elevating my strength by roughly 5 times, he felt pretty light. I put him over my shoulder and held his head to keep it from jerking around. Then, I ran to the side of the building and clamped my hand onto the outside of a thick steel beam, running all the way down to the ground. I swung out of the building and slammed my feet onto it, then we began sliding down. Our Super 8 gauntlets and boots could reduce the friction between us and most surfaces. It wasn't enough to stop and hold us stuck to a wall Spider-Man style, but it could reduce our fall to a speed that wouldn't harm my civilian. Without someone being carried, I could have just jumped. At 7 stories, it might have hurt a little, but the suit elevated my speed and agility by roughly 5 times as well, so with a good tuck and roll, it would have been doable. Either way, a jump like that with a civilian was a no-go. I called my
Yeah.
blades back to hover
That would have just made them go whoosh,
in front of us.
whip
I
and
knew in
all.
a simulation like this I wouldn't be targeted while I had a civilian on me, but kept the blades up to block as practice, knowing it was what I'd do in a real battle. We reached the ground and I ran my civilian to the end of the course. I lay him down gently on a gurney next to where Hekima was standing, watching a large tablet, monitoring various cameras across the track. He smiled. Buttery smooth save, Kaio. I
Thank
hadn't
you, Sal.
expected that, him acting like his real self instead of his harsh military trainer self, but I guessed with only 1 week left, he figured he could just be positive and encouraging now.
Oh, well,
I nodded
yeah, hell
appreciatively
yeah.
and ran back out to look for more civilians. I ended up rescuing 7 overall and taking out 26 soldiers. Every day I used the
That's good.
Super Wraith blades, they felt more like they were a part of my body that I controlled as easily as I could my own hands. That final week solidified that connection. During that
here we
week,
go.
did the same sort of simulated rescue event every day with slight changes. Later in the week, they had a member of our squad's tech randomly stop working, so we'd all have to work together to protect them. The second time that happened, it was Quinn, and she tried to just go on fighting without her blades, so it
Don't!
took us a while to find out that she needed help. Hekima took that opportunity to remind us that we were a squad out there, and if one of us went down, we would be worse off for every mission going forward.
Yeah,
So if you
Quinn.
need help, ask for it. The last day came, and it felt like any other day until it just ended. We were told that we all
Oh.
graduated and were officially becoming members of the Super Wraith squadrons. It was exciting, but hardly surprising at that point. I think
Still,
we would have
though.
all been astounded if anyone in our squad hadn't graduated after all we'd been through. As it stood, our squad was led by Hekima Aka and had 7 squad soldiers. Myself, Adachi Kaio,
Good.
Akali Chippensal, Jin Quinn,
Nice.
Takada Kiko, Sarata Suta, Oda Mirika, and Sashitu Shred. With the number of people who'd made
I'm sorry I'm messing up that name, but Shred. Huh, that's an interesting last name. And I'm so sorry I butchered that.
it
Forgive
through,
me.
we actually had a suitable number for a proper squadron. Though, I did wonder if Toshiko had meant what she'd said when we found out I could dual-wield Super Wraith blades. Did she still want to make me?
Oh, so wait, people normally only ever have one period. Oh, okay. I thought it was possible for people to have 2 when they became full-on members. I thought he was only special in that he could have 2 during the training. Oh, so he's better than what I thought.
Being a part of her squad? All the graduates got together for a party in the rec room the night after our final training day. This was one rare occasion where they said we could have alcohol on site, but I didn't notice anyone drinking. I think we were all too high on our graduation excitement to need anything else. People
Oh, yeah,
danced and played
100%.
games and reminisced about the toughest training days. A bunch of people even gathered around to take turns trying to beat Chip at arm wrestling. None of them could. During the dancing,
Chuck.
Quinn even called me out to have a breakdance battle with her. I hadn't been eager to have all eyes on me dancing, but seeing her in action, I couldn't resist, and started by
Alright.
throwing the move she first inspired me to finally land. It immediately got wild cheers from people, so I kept going, before Quinn jumped back in and totally showed me up with some even crazier moves. After that, other people tried jumping in, but nobody was moving better than Quinn. I did wonder if Toshiko had any dance moves she'd want to throw down. At that thought, I looked around for her and, surprisingly, saw her up against a wall by herself,
Oh, she's
as
here.
she often was, going through notes on her tablet. Before I even realized what I was doing, I started walking towards her. I considered stopping myself. We were still a few weeks
Nah,
away
man.
from the handshake
Do it.
day, but I also realized that didn't mean I couldn't talk to her now. Besides,
Exactly.
whether she was the love of my life or not, we were both in the Super Wraith program. I'd have to get comfortable talking to her eventually. I tried to pretend it was just like going up to Hekima or one of the other squad captains.
Yeah,
She
it's
glanced
good.
up as she saw me coming
That is actually very good mentally to think of.
over, and I saluted. Must be fun seeing so many people excited to graduate from a program based around tech you built, huh? She lowered the tablet and replied, "It certainly threatens to inflate the ego a bit. So you still gonna fight Hekima to get me onto your squad?" I cringed a bit after saying that. It felt too desperate, even though I'd just been trying to have some cheeky banter with her. Her response wasn't what I expected. Maybe. Private Adachi,
Ooh.
does the term Super Wraith mean anything to you outside of this program? Does it remind you of anything? from your distant past, maybe? I thought for a
As far
second,
as
but
I
didn't
know.
remember hearing it before. I shrugged. My mom drove a Subaru when I was a kid. Besides that, I don't think so. She nodded, and her smirk remained, but now it felt forced, like she was disappointed. She pushed away from the wall. You'll join my squad eventually, but stick with Aka's for now. You've built a good relationship with that team, and squad dynamics are important. Enjoy the celebration. She left the room after that and didn't
Hold
come
on.
back.
I tried to Google it to see if I could find anything. Found nothing.
My mind started replaying the conversation over and over. Had I said something wrong? Should Subaraith have meant something to me? I started getting frustrated thinking about it, but soon Chip came over to me and yanked me back into the dance circle. I got back into the swing of the party and started having fun again. After that night, we had a few days to rest and leave the compound to visit family. I went to see my mom, who I'd eventually told about what I was doing. She wasn't thrilled about me joining a dangerous military program, but when she saw the physical transformation I'd gone through, and just heard how much more calm and kind I was when I spoke to her, she said, whatever I was doing, keep doing it.
Oh,
She
yeah.
came and clapped excitedly for me at the graduation ceremony at the end of our days off. We were put into our official squadrons that day, and, as expected, our squad remained as it was from training, being called the Scarlet Squadron, likely after Hekima Aka's name and the color of his own Subaraith blade. I wasn't being taken onto Toshiko's team. I was still confused by our conversation at the party, but didn't waste too much time ruminating on it. For the next 2 weeks, we continued training as usual, and went to investigate a place where a suspected Q-Serax attack was going to happen, but nothing came of that. The Q-Serax hadn't attacked in 2 months. It was the longest gap in attacks we'd seen. Some suspected that they were finished, but most people didn't buy it. We still didn't know what they wanted, but we doubted they'd gotten it yet.
Yeah, that's
Though
gonna be
it
something.
was possible the Subaraith soldiers thumping them at every turn in Japan and America had scared them off. Japan wasn't big on exporting or sharing lethal military tech with other parts of the world, but apparently deals were being made to send Subaraith suits to many more countries. Though rumor was nobody other than Toshiko actually knew the full process for building them. That would make widespread distribution pretty difficult.
Incredibly
Eventually, I
difficult.
reached the 332nd day after my fateful meeting with Yorick. That night, Chip found me before bed and pulled me aside. He was still the only person who knew about my near-death experience and the deadline.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
friendo, you ready for the big day? I nodded. Yeah, I think so. Honestly, it's kind of hard to process that it's actually here. But at the same time, I don't know how much things are really going to change. I mean, Quinn's gotta be my rival, right? You don't know that. It could still be me, he said jokingly defensively. Yeah, maybe.
You never know, Chip. You never
But
know.
as far as the love of my life goes, I've got no idea. Maybe it's Toshiko, but maybe it's Kiko or Mirika, I guess. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's nobody here. I mean, tomorrow is just an average training day, so we'll probably just stay on the compound, but maybe someone will come to visit the base that I haven't met or something.
Oh, there's gonna be something tomorrow. I'm calling it.
But honestly, no matter what happens, I'm feeling pretty great about life as it is. Chip made a face like he was about to start tearing up. I'm real glad to hear that, friendo. But whoever this gal ends up being, you best still make lots of time for us to hang. Got it? I chuckled. Of course, man. We're still in this together or not at all. We hugged, then headed off to sleep. Right when my head hit the pillow, I got into my tactical breathing, knowing if I didn't, my head would be reeling for hours over the next day's events. I fell asleep nice and fast, but then was awakened abruptly by a blaring alarm. It was 11:11 at night, still on the 332nd day.
Whoa, 11:11. Oh, that's 4 fours.
As
4 ones.
Hekima
Sorry.
banged on our bunks.
Sorry.
Move it, Scarlet Squadron! Tokyo's under attack!
Called it, okay.
I immediately leapt out of bed as Chip was asking, Which ward, Captain? Hekima's eyes were wide as he was looking at the message on his tablet. A lot of them.
Oh, crap. A lot of the wards? Shit, it's a mass attack! But damn, is this gonna be good, and I can't wait for the next episode. But for that, we're all gonna have to wait for next week.
The more this story goes, the more I'm glad that I rebooted it from the pilot. Like, I
Hells
still
yeah.
liked that pilot, but there was so much story to be told within what happened in that episode, in the in-between moments and stuff, and I love how this story's going so much. If you are enjoying it
it's
and you haven't
good.
watched my other series, I have the Trismegistus Academy going right now, as well as Fear of the Demon Hunters for something a little bit spookier. Actually, the first episode of Trismegistus Academy might be creepier than Fear of the Demon Hunters. I don't know.
Oh, 100%.
Anyway, in case you
I mean, hello,
didn't
those
hear in my
laughing
last
noodles.
episode, Vigilance as a book is finally, officially, properly releasing on
There we go.
Monday, December 2nd. After a long journey getting it done, I'm super excited to
that's
have
cool.
it finally coming out, and I'll be plastering the link for it everywhere once it is up. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive
Although
or
inspiring
inspiring
note.
note. And the thought I want to leave you with today is probably an odd person for me to be quoting, because it's the founder of KFC, and I've literally only had one bite of KFC in my entire life.
go
But
on.
still an inspiring quote. And he said that just because you took longer than other people doesn't mean you failed. He started KFC at 65.
Oh yeah, that's
One of
right.
the most famous fast food chains there is. And he didn't start it until he was 65 years old. So if you
And I
think
forgot
you're
about
falling
that.
behind, just keep that in mind. You still got plenty of time to achieve your dreams. Just, get on it. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday.
Alright everyone, well that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the videos will be in the description below, and I'll see all of y'all next week when we flick it back on. Until then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.